Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at something that on the surface, you might not think is super interesting.
Okay.
Mentoring. But you know what?
Yeah.
It's actually way more interesting than you might think. And I'm really excited to talk about this with you today.
I am too. Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they hear the word mentoring, they think of somebody who's just starting out their career and needs some guidance.
Right.
But it's really so much broader than that.
It is.
And it can be beneficial at every stage of your career.
Absolutely. And I think a good place to start is just to sort of set the stage a little bit. We see all these huge companies, these Fortune 500 companies. I think something like 98% of Fortune 500 companies have some kind of a formal mentoring program in place.
It's true. Yeah, it's become really popular. And I think part of the reason for that is
Why is that?
well, I think it's partly because companies are facing a lot of challenges these days. You know, they're dealing with things like high turnover. They need to upskill their employees.
Right.
And they're really trying to create more inclusive workplaces.
Mm-hmm.
And mentoring programs can help with all of that.
Absolutely. And, when we think about the types of programs, there's so many different ways to do this.
Oh, yeah, there's a ton of variety.
You've got your traditional mentoring, where you've got a more senior person mentoring, a more junior person. But you've got reverse mentoring.
Right.
Which is really interesting.
Where it's the other way around.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you've got group mentoring, peer-to-peer mentoring, virtual mentoring, onboarding, mentoring. I mean, there's
Sponsorship.
Yeah.
All kinds of different approaches.
There's so many different ways to approach this. And I think that's part of what makes it so interesting and so
Absolutely.
applicable to so many people.
It's really about finding what works best for you and your organization.
Exactly. So I think one of the things that's really interesting to me is the bottom line impact of this.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we're talking about real dollars and cents here.
For sure.
I mean, there's this one stat that just blew me away. It said that mentoring programs can result in a 50% higher retention rate.
Yeah, that's huge.
I mean, think about that.
Yeah. Think about the cost of employee turnover.
Oh.
I mean, it's incredibly expensive to recruit and hire new employees.
Train them, get them up to speed.
Exactly. And then when you lose an employee, you lose all that knowledge and experience.
Right.
So mentoring can really help companies save money.
Yeah. And there's this great example of a company called Red Hat.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of them.
They actually saved $6 million in retention costs over a 29-month period thanks to their mentoring program.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah. And so, if you're a company listening to this,
right,
pay attention.
This is something to pay attention to, for sure.
It's not just a feel-good initiative.
Yeah.
This is something that can really impact your bottom line.
Exactly. It makes good business sense.
Right.
And it's not just about the financial benefits either.
Right.
There are a lot of personal benefits to mentoring as well.
Right. Yeah. And that's what I want to talk about next is those less tangible but still incredibly important benefits.
Yeah, like the skills that you develop through mentoring.
Right.
Things like self-awareness, resilience,
communication skills,
adaptability,
communication skills,
goal setting. Yeah, all those things.
All these things.
And those skills are valuable in all aspects of life, not just at work.
Right.
They can help you in your personal relationships, in your community.
Absolutely.
Everywhere you go.
There's this great quote by George Lucas who,
Star Wars guy.
Yeah, Star Wars guy. He said, mentors have a way of seeing more of our faults than we would like. It's the only way we grow. And it's so true, right?
It's so true. Because sometimes we need that outside perspective to help us see ourselves more clearly.
Right. We need someone who can be honest with us and tell us the things that we maybe don't want to hear.
Exactly. But that we need to hear in order to grow.
Right. And, that kind of feedback can be tough to take.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But it's so valuable.
It is, because it helps you identify those areas where you might be holding yourself back. And it gives you the tools and support you need to overcome those challenges.
Right. And become a better version of yourself.
Exactly. And it's not always, a younger person needing the mentoring.
Right.
I mean, it can be really valuable for people at all different stages.
Absolutely.
Senior level people, mid-career, anybody.
Yeah, and that brings up a good point, I think, for our listeners who are maybe thinking, okay, this all sounds great, but how do I actually find a mentor if my company doesn't have a formal program?
Yeah, that's a really common question.
Right.
And I think the first thing is to just get really clear on what you're hoping to gain from a mentoring relationship.
Okay, so what does that mean exactly?
Well, like, think about your goals. What skills do you want to develop?
Yeah.
What kind of guidance are you looking for? And once you have a better sense of that, then you can start looking around and seeing who might be a good fit.
So where would you start looking?
Well, I mean, it could be someone you already admire within your company,
Okay.
even if they're not in your department.
Right.
Or it could be someone you've met at an industry event or through a professional organization.
Okay.
You know, it could even be someone you connect with online.
Right.
The key is to find someone who has the experience and expertise that you're looking for.
So don't be afraid to reach out to people who are maybe a little bit ahead of you on the career path.
Right.
Or working in a field that you're interested in.
Yeah, exactly.
And how do you actually go about approaching them?
Yeah.
Like, do you just go up to them and say, hey, will you be my mentor?
Well, you could, but I think it's usually a little more subtle than that.
Okay.
You know, maybe start by just expressing your admiration for their work
Mm-hmm.
and asking if you could pick their brain about something specific.
Okay.
Like, you could say something like, I was really impressed with your presentation at the conference last month,
Right.
and I'd love to hear more about your experience in whatever field. And just keep it casual.
Yeah.
Focus on the value that you're hoping to gain from the relationship.
So what if you're not comfortable reaching out to someone you know?
Well, there are actually a lot of online platforms and communities now that are specifically designed for mentoring.
Oh, wow.
So you can connect with people from all over the world
Interesting.
who have expertise in different areas.
Okay.
So that's definitely an option.
And it's kind of like dating.
It is a little bit like
You
dating.
might not find the right match right away.
Exactly. You gotta kiss a few frogs
There you go.
before you find your prince.
All right. So we've talked about how to find a mentor.
Right.
But what about the people who are thinking, hey, I've got some experience to share. I want to be a mentor.
Yeah, that's awesome.
What advice would you give to those folks?
Well, the first thing is to be honest with yourself about your capacity. You know, mentoring takes time and energy.
Right.
So you want to make sure that you have the bandwidth to really invest in the relationship.
So it's better to say no up front
Exactly.
than to overcommit and not be able to follow through.
For sure. Okay, what else?
And then think about the areas where you can provide valuable guidance.
Okay.
You know, it could be your industry knowledge, your leadership skills,
Right.
your experience with work-life balance,
Right.
whatever you feel like you have to offer.
And even just being a supportive presence, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Sometimes that's all someone needs.
Sometimes that's all they need is someone to listen,
Yeah.
someone to bounce ideas off of, someone who believes in them.
Someone who's got their back.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's say you've connected with a mentee.
Okay.
What's next?
Well, it's important to establish clear expectations and boundaries
Yeah.
right from the start.
Okay.
Like, how often are you going to meet?
What are your preferred modes of communication? Are there any topics that are off limits?
Right, setting those ground rules
Exactly.
so there's no confusion later.
Exactly. It just makes for a smoother relationship.
Okay, so we've covered the logistics, but what about like the less tangible aspects of mentoring?
Yeah.
Like, what makes a really great mentor?
That's a great question. I think it comes down to a combination of curiosity and empathy. Okay. You know, a great mentor is genuinely interested in getting to know their mentee as a person.
Not just as a project.
Right, not just as a task to check off their to-do list.
Right.
They ask insightful questions. They listen actively. They really try to understand their mentee's perspective.
They give feedback in a way that's constructive and supportive, not
Exactly.
critical or judgmental.
Right. It's about empowering the mentee
Yeah.
to find their own path,
Right.
not dictating what that path should be.
And celebrating those small victories along the way.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
You know, those little wins can make a big difference.
It's like being their cheerleader,
Exactly.
their advocate, their trusted advisor.
All rolled into one.
And you know what's really interesting is that the research shows that
Yeah.
these kinds of relationships can have a ripple effect.
Oh, for sure.
It's not just the mentor and the mentee who benefit.
Right.
It's the whole organization.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It creates a more positive and supportive work environment.
So if you're a leader listening to this,
Yeah.
you should really think about implementing a formal mentoring program, or at least encouraging these kinds of relationships to develop organically.
Absolutely.
Because the return on investment is huge.
It really is, both for the individual and the organization.
And even if you're not in a leadership position,
Right.
you can still be a champion for mentoring.
Absolutely.
Talk about it with your colleagues.
Yeah.
Share your own experiences. Encourage others to get involved.
Exactly. It's a simple but powerful way to create a more supportive workplace.
Okay, so before we move on to the last part of our deep dive,
Okay.
I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, that human connection factor.
Yeah, let's talk more about that.
Because mentoring is about so much more than just sharing information and skills.
It is. It's about building a relationship,
Right.
a real connection with another human being.
It's about creating a safe space
Exactly.
where people can be vulnerable, share their challenges,
Right.
get support and encouragement.
And that's so important these days.
It is.
You know, with all the stress and loneliness that people are feeling,
Absolutely.
mentoring can be a real lifeline.
It's a reminder that we're not alone,
Exactly.
that we're all in this together.
And that we can learn and grow from each other.
Welcome back to our deep dive on mentoring. We've talked a lot about the theory,
Right.
but I think it's always helpful to hear some real-world examples.
Absolutely. You know, stories about how mentoring has actually made a difference in people's lives.
Exactly. So do you have any good ones?
I do. So, have you ever heard of the concept of reverse mentoring?
I have.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's where a younger person mentors a more senior person, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's this great example of a large tech company
Yeah.
that was having trouble attracting and retaining young talent.
Okay, I can see how that would be a problem.
Yeah. And they realized that their leadership team
Yeah,
was kind of out of touch with the values and expectations of younger generations.
which makes sense, right? The generations have different values.
Exactly. And so they decided to implement a reverse mentoring program
Okay, interesting.
where they paired senior executives with millennial and Gen Z employees.
Okay,
And at first, the executives were a little hesitant.
how bad?
You know, they were like, what can we possibly learn from these young kids?
Right,
But they quickly realized that they had a lot to learn.
like what?
Well, the younger mentors were able to share their insights on things like social media trends,
Okay.
new technologies, evolving work-life balance preferences.
You know, all that stuff that's changing so rapidly.
Exactly. And so the executives were able to get up to speed on all these things.
It was a win-win.
It was a total
The
win-win.
younger employees felt heard and valued,
Right.
and the executives got some valuable insights.
Exactly. And the company as a whole benefited from a more inclusive and flexible work environment.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit
Okay.
and talk about the personal growth aspect of mentoring.
Okay.
Because I think a lot of our listeners can relate to feeling stuck in their careers at some point.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. That's a really common experience.
So tell me about it.
Well, there's this story about a mid-career professional who felt like she had hit a plateau.
Oh.
She had been in the same role for several years and was starting to question her career path.
I've been there.
Yeah, it's a tough spot to be in.
It is.
And so she decided to seek out a mentor who had successfully navigated a similar career transition.
Smart.
And through conversations with her mentor, she was able to gain clarity on her values, her strengths, her long-term goals.
It's like having someone hold up a mirror to you.
Exactly. And the mentor also helped her develop a concrete action plan
Nice.
to acquire new skills and expand her professional network.
Okay, so she had a roadmap.
She did, and with the support and guidance of her mentor,
Yeah.
she was able to make a bold career move,
Oh, wow. Good for her.
landed a new role that was much better aligned with her passions,
That's all.
and allowed her to grow both personally and professionally.
I love that story. It's so inspiring.
It is, and it just goes to show that mentoring can really make a difference.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Okay.
do you have any final words of wisdom for our listeners?
I do. For the mentors out there,
Okay.
remember that mentoring is a privilege. It's a responsibility.
Right.
So treat your mentee with respect, empathy, and genuine interest.
Great advice. Okay, what about for the mentees?
For the mentees, be proactive. Come to meetings prepared with questions, goals, topics you want to discuss.
Don't expect your mentor to do all the work.
Exactly. And be open to feedback, even if it's not always easy to hear.
It's how we grow.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask for help,
Right.
but also be resourceful
Okay.
and take initiative to learn and grow independently.
So it's a two-way street.
It is.
Mentoring is a collaborative journey
Absolutely.
that requires effort and commitment from both sides.
But the rewards can be amazing.
They can. Personal growth, professional advancement.
A deeper sense of purpose and connection.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful stuff.
It is.
So whether you're a seasoned executive or just starting your career,
Right.
consider the power of mentoring.
I agree.
It might just be the key to unlocking your full potential.
And who knows, you might even make a lifelong friend along the way.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Well, that's all the time we have for today.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the unexpected power of mentoring.
It's been fun.
We'll see you next time for another insightful exploration of a timely topic.